I can imagine a world, I want to live in a world where the military, because it is interested in the long term well being of the nation and frankly the world, that it does own up to what it's gotten wrong, right? How relieved would we be to hear it say, you know what, here's why we made the error, and we put people in jeopardy, lives were lost. It is in all of our interest to correct the policy as quickly as possible so no more lives are lost, right? That would, I think, be a tremendous boost to morale and therefore a boost to readiness. But we see the opposite. I realized in listening to you earlier, Jordan, you were talking about face masks and the mandates and the fact that those mandates have implications, which I think go to, in part, what Grant is talking about, that the human face is a highly unique product of evolution, right? Our ability to exchange emotional information with our faces is unparalleled. And it's there for a reason. And these masks, yes, they have a symbolic relevance. They function as a kind of gag, an anonymizer, a confuser of emotional information. But, they directly interfere with our relationships with each other. Now, here's the connection, though. I got the mask thing dead wrong. I was very early on masks. In fact, I was so early on self-masking as the information about COVID was emerging that I got the nickname at the hardware store that I frequent as the Bandit, because I was coming into the hardware store in a bandana before anybody was wearing masks, right? Because I thought this is bound to be helpful. This is a dangerous virus, which I still believe. And I thought, I was modeling the behavior that I thought was right. As the evidence came in that masks are mostly useless and cloth masks especially so, I acknowledged my error. I said, look, I had it wrong. Here's why I think I had it wrong. And I don't advise you to wear these things. And in fact, I'm now concerned that we're doing we're putting them on children, which is bound to interfere with their normal psychological development and their ability to interrelate with each other and their ability to understand adults and their ability to develop a sense of irony. And all of these important human characteristics are interfered with by masks. So, did I like being wrong about masks? No, it was embarrassing, but it's not half as embarrassing as staying wrong, or worse, pretending that I hadn't gotten it wrong, right? And just changing my behavior and hoping nobody noticed. So, it seems to me the lesson is clear, right? Adults, part of being an adult is recognizing that you've made an error, acknowledging it so that errors are reduced in the future, both your own errors and other people's errors. And the government and the military are doing the exact opposite. They are not behaving in an adult fashion, which raises all sorts of questions.
Brett, I think on that note, for, being able to recognize that you're wrong, you can't even get there if you don't act in accordance with what you believe. So I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that people are afraid, they believe something and they're afraid to verbalize that or behave in accordance with what they believe. And you're not going to be right every time if you do that. But, to use another landmark psychology study, like I always think of the Ash conformity experiment. Like if you think the lines are different lengths, say so, and then look stupid and then apologize and change your mind. But you'll never be able to learn, and you'll never be able to do your duty to the organization, especially when it comes to solving complex problems and being able to get out of groupthink, if you don't say what you think and what you believe and lay it out as you understand it. Let other people test your reasoning and give you feedback. And, assume the risk that you're going to be wrong, because we're all going to be wrong at some point. We're human. To err is to human, or to err is to be human. So I think that, like you said, nothing's better, a better learning opportunity than making a mistake and then being able to recognize that and change your mind. but nobody's getting those opportunities because they're so terrified to say anything that's outside of, the Overton window.
Which goes to the earlier part of our discussion about the way that people are dissuaded from learning this lesson is they are punished if they show signs of learning it, right? So I think we have to acknowledge that, let's face facts. The reason that I'm doing the DarkHorse podcast is that I stood up and said what needed to be said about wokeness when it took over the college that I was very happily teaching at and that my wife was very happily teaching at. I don't work there anymore, right? I couldn't stay in my job, the job that I had very happily done for 14 years, very successfully done for 14 years, a job I felt great about. I had to find something else to do because it became impossible to continue in my role. Jordan, it sounds like that's your experience in the military. So it's not surprising that people who look at the costs, which have been artificially driven through the roof for doing the right thing, for acknowledging that you got something wrong, it is not surprising to me that people look at those costs and decide not to pay them. And in fact, I can't even really judge people who decide not to pay those costs because, look, I'm fortunate. I was able to move from that job and to do something else that keeps a roof over my family's head. But not everybody's in that position. A lot of people are in a much more insecure position to begin with. And so the ability of these coercive systems to punish them into compliance is that much greater. And the hard part about this is what really makes it safer. If we want to drive the costs of doing the right thing down, the way to do that is for more of us to stand up. But because these forces have such disproportionate influence over us, they can dissuade each individual from standing up. And therefore, there's no chorus of people standing up. And that chorus is therefore not in a position to make it safer for other people who are more insecure financially or in whatever other way to stand up. So at some level, this all comes down to a massive power asymmetry, right? What is right is not unclear at this point, right? Many of us got stuff wrong early in COVID, but by now the information is there for people to simply evaluate the evidence and reach a reasonable conclusion. But so many people have said and done things along the way, and the cost of bailing themselves out has been artificially amplified specifically so that they will not say what they now either do or should know. And let's just agree that that's, at the very least, an actually difficult puzzle to solve.
I absolutely agree that it's difficult, but we all have different values. And for me personally, self-expression, I don't think we have a country if we lose the First Amendment. If we don't have the ability to express ourselves, we don't have an America. And I don't think that there's any cost too high to pay in order to be able to express yourself. And I'm prepared to face any consequences with respect to that. This might sound dorky, but I think about, the speech in Braveheart. It's like, stay quiet and, you'll live. And, many years from now, laying in your bed, you'll think you could have stood up and you could have spoken your mind, and maybe it would have worked out. And on that note, look at what's happened with Dr. Sam Sigelov. He has been a very vocal proponent of taking an honest look at these injections. And they came after his license for it as a physician. And recently he just got his clinical privileges reinstated. So a lot of it is an illusion. A lot of it is based on fear. And I think a lot of people might be surprised as to the degree to which, if you are speaking from the heart and you're saying what you believe to be true, then it's totally unreasonable for people to try and ruin your lives about that. And in fact, when people try to ruin your life or take adverse action against you from speaking your mind and speaking your heart, it empowers our side in this struggle towards freedom of expression and America and American values.
Yeah, I'm struck, in the circles that I travel in, there's we've all heard it. People will say, is that a hill you want to die on? And I have a complex relationship with that particular formulation, because my sense is there are hills I'll die on. I don't want to die on them. That's not my intent. But the point is, the real question is, do you believe that there are hills that are worth risking your life over? And our military, by its very nature, is composed or needs to be composed of people who agree that there are hills worth dying on. And I would say two of them are easy to name. One of them is Nuremberg Hill and the other is Constitution Hill. And the fact that these hills are now threatened because individuals are being dissuaded from thinking those are hills worth dying on is itself, it's almost a separate threat here, right? We are being trained to believe that our own individual well-being is so important that these abstractions, Nuremberg and the Constitution, are secondary to them. Nothing could be further from the truth, because in fact, we are the custodians of something incredibly, immeasurably valuable, right? We are custodians of America. We are custodians of the West. We are custodians of the earth. We are custodians of the human lineage. All of these things are bigger than we are. And all of them are threatened if we allow these forces to train us to accept obviously wrong things, to agree to orders that are obviously immoral. All of those things are jeopardized. So really, I have to wonder, who looks at issues this big and doesn't realize, actually, you know what? I'm not looking to die on any hill, but if I've got to die on one, that's a reasonable choice, right? Who doesn't see that?
Many military leaders have asked many people I know, and I've gotten the question myself, is this the hill that you want to die on? And those leaders asking that question, they will never find that hill. If this is not it, they will never find that hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If this ain't that, if COVID doesn't reveal all of these hills and the need to protect them, I don't know what does. It seems that clear. Jordan, go on.
Yeah, I've been asked that same question. And, I think a question that I have and that many military members have is, where is the moral courage of our commanders? And I have been told in, confidence by many military members that they're rooting for me, that they're rooting for us, that they wish that they could, join us. And it's been very eye-opening for me because the majority of those comments come from men who got the vaccine, that maybe did it sacrificially for their family, to provide for their family, but others did it because it was just easier to give in and to submit to this than to fight. And so for me, I look at that in the state of our military and I think, where is the moral courage? Where are the commanders? And Lieutenant Colonel Long has said this, where are the mighty men of courage? And I think that the military and the government did such a great job isolating people and making people think that they were alone, that, their thoughts on not getting this were crazy and that they were wrong. They did such a good job of it that so many people gave in and have to now sit with that and feel, that they gave up their bodily autonomy for a lie. And so I think, it's never too late to stand up and say, we were wrong. But I think a lot of military members feel completely betrayed by their commanders, betrayed by the chain of command, betrayed by the country we swore, to protect, that we would die for. And that has been very disappointing. I hear testimony and parents of service members reach out to me all the time and say, all my son wanted to do his entire life was be a Marine and serve this country. And now he's discharged for not getting an EUA vaccine, and he has a less than honorable discharge characterization and can't even get a job. And so it's really breaking down this patriotic, element of Americans. And this is going to have, you talked about the mask mandates and how detrimental it will be for children. This is going to have generational effects on the readiness for our military.
Yeah, profound effects that are going to last for generations if something honorable doesn't gain control of the system and start righting the ship. I will tell you, I'm a little bit chilled to hear that your experience has been of people quietly, personally approaching you and saying that they're rooting for you while they're not standing up, because I have had that experience more than once. Most profoundly, when Heather and I stood up against the woke revolution at Evergreen, many people, especially colleagues, came to us privately and said, "You're right," but refused to say anything publicly. They allowed it to happen to us. And in that context, I came to some conclusions I didn't want to come to. I realized that academia selects for cowardice and that there is an epidemic of cowardice in academia as a result. But it's quite another thing to discover that the epidemic of cowardice is also afflicting the military, right? It's one thing for people to get things wrong, maybe to be coerced into thinking wrongly about them. It's another thing for people to know better in the military and not have the courage to say what they know. That really speaks to a force that is not going to be ready to make the kind of sacrifices in battle that one must make. So it's alarming for me to hear that. I can't be surprised, because it was one of the most painful lessons. These crises, they reveal character. And to the extent that that cowardice compromises people's character, boy, do these crises reveal where it exists. But it's riddled throughout our military. That's a scary shock.